So our next speaker will be Dr. Julia Maria Monig from the Center for Science and Thought, University of Bonn, Germany. She'll be speaking to us today on what do we mean by human-centric AI. Dr. Julia, please, we are waiting for you to speak to us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. But I can't share my slides yet, I'm afraid.
Okay, please, Dr. Bambele, can you stop sharing your slides, your screen,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
No
So
problem.
you can do
Thank
that
you.
now.
Perfect. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect. So thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to this really interesting colloquium. I'm sorry I can't stay after my own talk. I'm really sorry we have another event here, but I'm so grateful to be here and to have been able to listen to the three first very interesting talks. So I'm going to look today a bit into what we mean by human-centric AI. I'm first going to talk a bit about values, then about human-centeredness, and then what this human might be, and then I'm going to give a brief outlook because this is work in progress, actually. Dr. Castron has earlier cited the paper by Jobin et al., where they present or where they look into the existing AI ethics guidelines and code of conduct. And there is another paper by my colleague Nicholas Kluge, Korea, that is entitled Worldwide AI Ethics, and they did the same thing as Jobin et al., but they claim or they try to be even more broad and to take into account ethical guidelines from all over the world. And I think they have 200 now in this paper, and they try to have another one or like an updated version with 300 guidelines. And human-centeredness or alignment does occur apparently as a term in 58 of these worldwide guidelines. But is this really a worldwide review? I mean, they chose the title as a contrast to the existing papers like Jobin. Because if you look at this map, you see that actually it's not, it's just certain countries from which these guidelines came. And it's, if we look more closely, I only found one African country, meaning South Africa. But as I said, they are working on, finding more guidelines and principles. But in contrast to the map we just saw are actually other maps. These are from colleagues from the Institute for Science and Ethics here at the University of Bonn. They're working on sustainability of AI, and they have recently also held a workshop on AI in the majority world, so meaning, the global south is so-called. And I just want to focus on two examples here. If we contrast the blue map, or the map on which the countries are marked in blue, and the orange ones, we see that the data center locations are very much not in those countries that are receiving most of the e-waste currently. And one region that for obvious reasons doesn't receive any e-waste is Europe. But Europe has a new legislation published only in July. The final text was published June 2024. And this regulation says that the AI that is being used and developed in the European Union should be human-centric and trustworthy. And they're also very much highlighting the values of the Union to facilitate the protection of natural persons, undertakings, democracy, the rule of law, and environmental protection. So the question is what this human-centric might be. And as a preparatory work for this regulation, we had this very influential, or at least Europe very influential paper, which are guidelines by a high-level expert group that the European Commission set up. And it's called Ethics Guidelines for Trustworthy AI. And part of trustworthiness apparently is also human-centeredness. And so they define 4 ethical principles, which you can see here, and 7 key requirements that AI has to fulfill in order to be trustworthy. Why trustworthy? Of course, the European Union is also a economic union, not only a political one, or first it was an economic union. And so, of course, people should trust in technology in order to the technology being used and making money. And so, and there are also other actors that use this term human-centered, for instance, a center at the Stanford University. Then there is a book by Ben Schneiderman called Human-Centered AI. And we also have actors from industry like IBM, who also claim they are making human-centered AI. And this is, as I said, related to values. And also Google has discovered this topic and asked, how can we build human values into AI? But with value alignment, there are also problems. I have an example here, or several examples from a non-AI related market. So IKEA is a big furniture store acting worldwide. I saw they have about 4 stores in Africa. That's what their website says. And so what they do, they try to align their marketing to the values of the specific countries, which probably every company does, you know. But these are, in my view, problematic if they, for instance, on the top right, you see the same cover of a catalog in Sweden as opposed to Saudi Arabia, where they just removed the mother from the picture. Or maybe they took another one, but you know what I mean. And there are other examples. Here's a Catholic from Israel, and the one that is addressed to Orthodox Jews. And they also in Russia, they took out a story about a lesbian couple from the UK, and they argued, oh, they're just complying with local laws. It's nothing that they, you know, nothing wrong they're doing. But I think if we ask, are these actual values, I find this differentiation our host made in one of her papers very convincing, that these are actually moral beliefs. It's not ethical values. So I tried to define what human-centered AI might mean, and I came up with this definition. Human-centered or human-centric AI is an approach to current development of technology by different stakeholders, so companies, policymakers, governments, research institutions, researchers, that tries to ensure that human values are taken into account when designing, developing, and deploying AI systems. But if that's the definition of human-centered AI, why do we need, you know, another topic? Why can't we just talk about a value-centered AI and value-centered technology development and design, which is a term that is being used at least since the 1990s by Batya Friedman and George Henry. So what is human? If we think we need something human-centered and not only value-centered. Sorry, it was one too much. So in the philosophical tradition, usually the human has been defined as an image of the self opposed to either living beings or inanimate entities, sorry. So usually opposed to godlike creatures or opposed to other animals. And there are many definitions of what man is, like Zoon Politikon by Aristotle. I don't have time to read through all of them, but I chose these because these are some I find quite convincing, sorry. And I think Hannah Arendt made this very interesting observation that we as a species that is not only able to destroy what it has made, but also what it didn't create, meaning the whole world, with the atomic bomb back in the 1950s. But also, I think we are the animal that invents computers, and kind of in line with Arendt's reasoning here, that they might one day surpass our capacities. But this is like the traditional view, humans against animals. And today we are rather trying to figure out what distinguishes us humans from machines, also maybe relating to the talk before mine. And so there's Beate Rössler who says Romans got sick, and there are other explanations. They're lacking moral imagination. And I think one interesting thing would be to look into the fact whether they can have collective intentionality, which of course I can't, yet, because they don't even have intentionality at all. So another way to approach the definition of human is, of course, to look at its contraries. And so I think one point here is what can be described as inhuman is the atomization of individuals. And here we might see a way of the African approaches that highlight a community and relational concepts that might come into the debate and into the arguments I'm making, because of course this is also a capitalist approach, because they want just consumers interested. It's also what Hannah Arendt, for instance, argues. Consumers interested in consuming even always more, ever more goods. And they're not interested in us building a community and maybe resisting to this consummation. And there are other mottos that might not be very human, like move fast and break things. It's not really value-centered. Don't be evil, on the other hand. The former Google motto is something that we might think is positive. But of course, there is the worst cases like barbarism, crimes against humanity, and slavery. But on the other hand, these have also been defined as human because it's only humans who do this, right?
Okay, please, sorry to cut in. You have 5 minutes more.
Thank you. So my question is whether human-centered AI is actually only value-centered, whether it's human rights-centered. So we see this in risk assessments that are also becoming mandatory with the AI Act, for instance, in Europe, or is it just ethics watching, like corporate digital responsibility, just companies that are claiming that they are kind of doing something positive? Is it actually also a critique of monopolies, because there are so few companies that are actually selling AI products, or like in China, it's rather the state? Or is it just supposed to secure a spot in the AI race? Because if we, of course, think at the developments, there's US, there's China, and then Europe, they don't have that much. We can also see this in the maps I presented. They don't have much don't get much of the AI cake, as we say it. So solutions to this could be that we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So there are universal rights that we have agreed upon. Maybe we can also look into the question whether humanism could serve as a definition for this human and human-centeredness. And there's also very often human dignity that comes to mind when we define and discuss these concepts. And the question is, are these values actually Western values, or can they have universal, how do you say, like a universal value? Or there's also standardization. It's a project I'm currently working on, who thinks that standards are helpful to, make it more ethical. And Marcus Gabriel says there are only 3 values, 3 moral values, good, bad, and neutral. And so it's like an easy discussion. It's just in historical times that, for instance, slavery was bad. When Aristotle said slavery is something good or neutral, of course, it was already bad back then. So my outlook would be, and here I think this makes a connection with the talk before mine, that maybe I should look a bit more into the concept of personhood, because, for instance, in Immanuel Kant, we see personhood and humanity connected. And I also find very interesting another paper from our host. I really find it interesting. I'm not just, citing this because you are our host. These differences between Western and African approaches that you make in one of your papers, the subjective and the communal, the individualistic and the relational, and the solitary and the holistic. And I'm wondering whether it's actually true that all Western approaches are only individualistic. For instance, if we think of Hannah Arendt again, she also thinks of this web of relationships and is critical of individualism. So, and just last image, this is what stable diffusion thinks that human-centered AI looks like. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yulia, for this interesting lecture.